Mr. Chairman, thank you for convening this hearing. I'll make a quick comment. As a former associate dean at University of California Medical School, we did look extensively at the loss of undergraduate talent, and that clearly is tied to our K through 12 system, particularly in lower income communities, and students just not being prepared. If we can hold on to those students when they get to their junior year, they do make up the gap, but we lose far too many of our students there. My question, I'll direct it at Dr. Jackson. Also, coming out of a research university background, a key element that we need to focus on is that technology transfer issue, how academia and industry partner. And if you could give us some specific recommendations, and I'd open it up to any of the panelists, how we can do that better, how we can work on that partnership.
Thank you. I would say a couple of things. First, there are many mechanisms. This whole question about technology transfer, how ideas go from the university into the marketplace, is a complex one, and it happens through multiple routes. There are university industry partnerships, industrial liaison programs. There are entrepreneurs who take the intellectual property they develop in the university out of the university. The university licenses out intellectual property. All of these things are pathways for that. I think there's a balance that one has to strike as a university president in terms of the focus on the basic research and the fundamental learning that goes along with that, and the exploitation of the intellectual property to move it into the marketplace. And at Rensselaer, we focus on both. We actually have a 1,250-acre technology park that is actually home to about 70 enterprises, primarily technology-based. We have what's called the Emerging Ventures Ecosystem, which specifically looks into the research, work with our faculty, find where there is exploitable, important intellectual property, and then look for the right translational pathway, whether that pathway has to do with licensing, with helping the faculty member launch a company, joint venturing, et cetera. We also operate as part of that an incubation program. But in our case, we went from having one fixed incubator to having a kind of a virtual incubator where we broker the right space for companies. This is very important. And I spoke in my oral remarks about shared infrastructure. A big problem for many startup companies, particularly in areas of new technology, has to do with the so-called valley of death, where they go from the sort of very initial startup phase, and they may get angel investors for that, to be able to scale what they do, to do prototyping, and then ultimately get larger investment. And so there has to be a way for that to happen. It's interesting that we in some ways do that through certain mechanisms like OPIC and the XM Bank when it comes to companies doing things out of the country. But we need something that relates to that kind of thing inside the company. So these are some of the things I would say. The other has to do with patent policies. And on the one hand, the new patent legislation is very helpful. It's very helpful to companies in particular. But it's caused universities to rethink, particularly the piece having to do with first to file. On the other hand, in terms of the kind of domain within which to operate and how to ensure that, it has been helpful. So all of these kinds of mechanisms. I also believe that, and Chuck talked about making the R&D tax credit permanent, that has an effect that spurs, I think, companies to do more. But it also, in an interesting way, because of that spur, can increase the interest of companies in working with universities in more basic areas.
4 things about this in 14 years as president of MIT, and 2 of them have been greatly supplemented by what I've learned at the national academies. First of all, we need a simplified policy pattern. I'm not talking about federal policy now. I'm talking about agreements between universities and companies, at least for modest scale projects. It should be a boilerplate, no negotiation kind of package. And we're making some progress toward that. Second, what we most need with big companies, long-term strategic partnerships, sticking with it in ways that honestly the federal government frequently can't do. There's a great example of Mr. Templeton's company and a few faculty at MIT in the area of signal processing. It's been running for decades, not at a terribly high financial level, but it's been really productive. Third, and not every university can do this, I would admit, but we need some large-scale partnerships, by which I mean significant multi-million-dollar partnerships between a university and a company, because only then do you get real interaction with the thought leaders in the company. You can't do many of them, but a few of them are important. And finally, on the entrepreneurial side, which is so much of what is, quote, technology transfer today at an RPI or an MIT or virtually any of our great public or private universities, creating opportunities for young people to get coached, hands-on coached by real entrepreneurs and real VCs is just worth its weight in platinum. It's the real key to building up that ecostructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.